Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. A few months ago, I was walking home from a late shift, maybe around 10:30 at night, and I noticed a man across the street who seemed to slow down every time that I did. I stopped to check my phone, and he stopped too, pretending to tie his shoe while watching me out of the corner of his eye. I crossed the road, and he crossed right after me with no hesitation. At that point, I was fully alert, so I turned down a side street that leads to my flat, and I could hear his footsteps behind me getting closer. I spun around and then I asked, "Can I help you?" And he stared at me for a second too long before saying, "You dropped something." Even though my hands were empty. When I said that I hadn't, he smiled, stepped closer, and then said my first name. I have never seen this man before in my life. I backed away, ran the rest of the way home, and I didn't stop until I was inside and locked the door. I checked from the window, and I saw him standing at the end of the street, looking straight at my building, before slowly walking away. I still take a different route home now, and I never wear headphones anymore. This story is a little weird. I live in a part of Iowa that has a lot of meth addicts, but this just feels different. I walk to work Monday to Thursday, and yes, I have a 3-day weekend, and I always go the same way. Well, I've lived here for about 2 years, but about 2 months ago, I noticed this guy sitting on the curb. I didn't think much of it, and every day at about 4 p.m. when I head to work, he's there, on the curb. I figured that he's new to town, just on his own schedule that matches my own. But last week I went to work and I walked past him, and after I turned a few corners around a few buildings over a river, I realized that I forgot my work visor. I didn't want to wear the spare one that everyone wears that's never washed, so I turned around and I started to walk back. I crossed the river, but the man was now walking towards me. I smiled, and he didn't even make eye contact. We walked past each other, and that was that. I got my visor, and I started walking back to work. But this is where I started to get worried. He was clearly following me. When I started walking back, he was again walking towards me. I crossed the street to use the other sidewalk, and god damn it, he not only gave me eye contact, he was giving me the fucking eye for using the other sidewalk. I figured I was overthinking it, but I decided to play it safe. I didn't like leaving my apartment unwatched, so I called my girlfriend to come over to stay while I'm at work. When she got there, she said that there was a guy outside my apartment smoking, and when she described him, it sounded just like him. Eventually, he left, and I returned home. The next day again, I was going to have to walk to work, and I asked that my girlfriend stayed at home. I started walking, and again, the dude was sitting there. So I confronted him. I asked him for his name. He stood up and gave out the loudest fucking guttural scream that I ever heard. I freaked out and I started running back home. I ended up calling out for work due to feeling unsafe, and a few hours later, I heard someone scratching at the window. I looked outside. I knew who it was, but I didn't want it to be true. And of course, it was the guy. And oh my god, I was bawling, yelling at my girlfriend to call the police. The police came and I gave them a description, and that was it. The freaky part comes to yesterday. I got a phone call from an unknown number. I figured that it was spam, but I just kept getting phone calls. So I answered, and I heard that loud scream come from the phone. I don't know whether it was the guy or some persistent prank caller, but I don't have a clue how the guy would have gotten my number. I reported it to the police. I'm deciding to write this out because goddamn, was he fixing to rob me? Just pranking me? Was he a drug addict, a stalker, some really mentally ill dude? Whatever it was, it creeped the hell out of me. This happened ages ago. I'm not overly concerned about it, but it was just an odd thing that happened, and that I wanted to share it. I was at a Costa with my mom after a pretty busy day. It's on the outskirts of my town, and admittedly a pretty sketchy sort of area. We were just heading there to get a drink and then head home. But my mom's car declined, so we decided just to head back. While we were stood outside our car in the parking lot, a guy in a van pulled up behind us in a parking space. My mom was texting my dad about something to see if she could get the drink sorted. The guy in the van was just staring at me and my mom, and he did so until we got inside the car. When we got into the car, he then drove off, or so we thought at least. We sat in our car for a couple of minutes before heading to leave, and when we did, I noticed that this same guy and the same van was sat by the edge of the exit to the parking lot, wheels turned, car on and everything. I didn't think much of it then, just thought that maybe he was waiting for something. But when we left the parking lot and began to drive away, he followed us. I was a bit worried about this guy knowing where we live in case he was following us, as I get overly paranoid about stuff like this. So I asked my mom if we could get something from a fast food place that was halfway across town. The entire time that we were driving to this fast food restaurant, he was just behind us. Halfway across our town, right behind us the entire time. He only ended up leaving when we pulled into the drive-thru. I have no clue what this was about, or if I'm still overthinking it, but it's been a while since it happened. It was just something odd that happened to us. Hi everyone, just call me Hannah for this story. I went on a trip because my life felt too tight where I lived. I had just turned 30 and my long-term relationship had ended a few months earlier and I was really burned out from work. I asked for time off, booked a solo vacation to a coastal city in southern Europe, and I told myself that it was about rest. I wanted some warm air, some slow mornings, that feeling of being anonymous somewhere far away. So I picked a place where I didn't know anyone and didn't speak the language well. I know that's a bit silly, but that's part of the challenge, okay? I wanted the full tourist experience, And at that time, it felt freeing. The first few days were calm. I walked everywhere. I spent hours by the water, and I ate alone without feeling awkward about it. But on my fourth night there, I stopped at a small bar near my hotel. It was nothing special. It was just a place with old wood tables, some dim lights and locals mixed with tourists, and I sat at the bar because it felt easier than taking up a table alone. And that is where I met him. He was sitting a few stools away and noticed that I was struggling to read the menu. He was around my age, maybe a bit older, with dark hair that looked carefully styled, and his clothes seemed not flashy, in a way that made him seem safe. He wasn't drunk or loud, and nothing about him felt alarming. He helped me order, and then we talked casually while having a drink. It felt like that kind of short vacation interaction that you expect, friendly but temporary, and he had never even introduced himself. When it was time to leave, he asked if I wanted to meet again while I was still in the city, but I declined. I remember being clear about it and not rude, just honest. I didn't want anything. I just wanted to relax and be a tourist for a few days before I go home. And after rejecting him, I went back to my hotel, and I didn't think much of it. People get rejected all the time, especially on vacation, and I just assumed that that was the end of it. The next day when I went out, our paths crossed again. I was walking through a busy outdoor market in the afternoon, moving slowly and stopping at different stalls. At first, I thought I was mistaken. Cities are full of familiar-looking strangers. But I saw him more than once, a few steps behind me, never close enough to accuse him of anything. But when I stopped, he stopped. And when I crossed the street, he crossed too. I told myself that I was being paranoid and that it was probably a silly coincidence. Until that night when I saw him near my hotel. I had gone out for dinner and came back later than usual. As I turned onto my street, I noticed him standing near the corner, leaning against a wall and looking down at his phone. He looked up as I passed. He didn't follow me inside, but he watched me go in. That was the first moment that I felt uneasy enough to check if I have locked my door twice. Over the next few days, the sightings kept happening. He was at the cafe that I went to. He was sitting outside even when it was cooler. He was on the same bus that I took to the beach, standing a few feet away and getting off at the same stop. What made it worse was how careful he was. He never touched me. He never blocked my way. He never followed me directly into places. It was always just enough to make me doubt myself. I started to wonder if I was imagining it. Maybe the travel stress was getting to me. But then I found proof that I couldn't explain away. One afternoon, I returned to my hotel room earlier than planned because I wasn't feeling well. When I checked my phone, and I had a new follow request on social media from an account with no profile picture. Now, I know what you're thinking. It could be anyone, right? But my gut feeling was telling me that it was him. The weird thing is that I hadn't told him my full name. I also hadn't tagged my location publicly. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the hallway made me sit up in bed. But later on, maybe from exhaustion, I did end up falling asleep. The next morning, there was a small folded piece of paper slipped under my door. It had my first name written on it. Nothing else. No message, just my name. I then went and reported it to the front desk. They took me seriously enough to move me to a different room on another floor. But they told me that there was little that they could do without the clear threat. I didn't go to the police because I didn't know how to explain it in a foreign language, and I was afraid of not being taken seriously because I was just a tourist. But the worst moment came near the end of my trip. I was on the train heading to a nearby town for a day trip, thinking that it would be safer to be somewhere crowded and more distant to where he was stalking me. When the train doors closed, I saw him at the other end of the car. He hadn't noticed me yet, but the way he turned his head back and forth made it clear. He was looking for me. I got off at the next stop, which wasn't the one that I was hoping to originally, and I waited on the platform with my heart pounding. A few seconds later, he stepped off too and scanned the area until his eyes landed on me. That was the first time that I felt real fear, The kind that makes your body feel hollow. I walked straight to the station office and I stayed there until I could get a train back. He didn't approach me, but he stood far away enough to watch. I left the country 2 days early. I paid the fee to change my flight without caring about the cost. And on my last night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept the lights on and my bag packed by the door. There was nothing dramatic that happened in the end. There was no confrontation, no chase. He never tried to stop me from leaving. But that almost made it worse. It felt kind of unfinished, like he could have done more if he wanted to. And when I landed back home, I blocked the account that had followed me. I didn't post photos from that trip for months. That vacation that was supposed to make me feel free again, instead, it taught me how quickly a stranger can decide that you matter to them in the way that you never agreed to, and how powerless you can feel when someone refuses to let go. During my first year of college, I thought I was being stalked by a bizarre man. After class, I went walking around campus and approached a trail in the woods. A man was in front of me just standing there looking at his phone. I thought nothing of it at first, but then, as the man was leaving, he rolled his window down in his vehicle and stared at me with this bizarre grin. I nodded, and then he drove over to a nearby parking lot and just sat there looking at me through his rearview window. I got a weird feeling, so I decided to cross the grassy knoll to the other side of campus to see if he was truly following me. And just as I had reached the parking lot, the man entered the same lot at the exact same time and then proceeded to park in a space nearby. I immediately got a nervous feeling and I proceeded to walk to the other side of campus. And just as I reached the back side, I saw the man in the same car driving towards my direction to park in another nearby space. As I was walking away, the man got out of the car and walked in my direction. He pretended as if he was on a phone call, but I saw right through it. I kept walking, and when I turned the corner of a nearby building, I began to run. Eventually, I lost sight of him. For an hour, I was freaking out because I didn't know what to do. Eventually, he saw me again at some point because he pulled back in the parking lot where I was walking. I approached the car and I knocked on the window. I asked the man if he was following me, but his answer was bizarre. "I don't even know you, dude," he replied. I thought his answer was evasive, so I tried to ask him again. He denied it again, but never fully answered the question. I left and I never saw that man again after that. But what do you think was happening? A few years ago, my girlfriend, me, and 4 of our friends rented a cabin for a few days during spring break. We just wanted a place where we could all chill and do whatever. The only determined plan we did make was for all of us to go rock climbing together. The cabin was bigger than expected, too. It had 3 bedrooms, one with a master bath, and then another separate bathroom, which was great. The living room was spacious enough for all of us to watch a movie in, and the kitchen was big enough for one of my friends to cook a full-course meal. He was going to a culinary school at that time, so he was always willing to cook for someone, and we were always willing to be the guinea pigs. The kitchen had a door to the back covered porch, which then led out to an open field with a big fire pit and trees that lined the back of it. It was perfect, especially for the price. And if it wasn't obvious, There were three couples, and we all drove separate cars and met there. We all chipped in and split the cost of our food, drinks, and entertainment, and legitimately, all worked out really well. I think the worst part that we had experienced was Mike and Jess missing a turn and having to guide them backwards. Well, that was until the second night. The night had a slight chill to it, but nothing a bonfire couldn't fix. So we went to start a fire and realized that none of us brought lighter fluid, so we started looking around the cabin for a lighter or matches or anything. We finally found a lighter that barely worked in the bathroom and was able to get our fire started. We all grabbed some drinks and sat by the fire, just talking and screwing off. When I noticed Leslie staring off, I nudged my girlfriend Madison to look at her and then she called her out. That's when Leslie pointed out a figure standing by the trees. Isaiah, being the guy that's not afraid of anything, called him out, asking if he wanted to join us, or if he at least had a lighter. After we all sat there snickering, we watched as he slowly turned and walked towards the driveway and then down the hill, until we couldn't see him anymore. This place was like a campground but with cabins, so we weren't really in the middle of nowhere. So at first, we just assumed that it was someone at a neighboring cabin watching us, possibly mad about us being outside, possibly being loud, That was actually a tame night, but some people are pretty whiny like that, so we decided to just take it back inside since the fire was weak anyways. And the rest of the night was just us playing a game inside, and it went just fine. The next day was our rock climbing and hiking day. We all piled into Jess's Jeep, and then we headed to the place. And the event went great, and we were all having a lot of fun. We ended up coming across a lake at the bottom of a small cliff, and being the dumb young people we were, we all made bets and dared Isaiah to jump into the lake from the top of the overhang. And like I said, it wasn't that high up, and swimming was permitted in that lake, so it wasn't that big of a deal. It was more so just his girlfriend that didn't want him to do it, but as dumb guys do, he did it anyway. And once we all got in, I just enjoyed floating on the water and people watching, when I noticed someone who stood out. It was a guy standing over by the cliffside that Isaiah jumped from, but the reason he stood out was because of his choice of clothing. While everyone else around us was in hiking garb, some bathing suits or even just shorts and a t-shirt, this guy was in black dress pants, a black suit jacket, and a black hat like a fedora style. He had the hat on pretty low, however, so I couldn't see his face. Yet, I felt his gaze. He was definitely staring in our direction, and this time I said out loud to everyone, "Are we being stared at?" This caused everyone to look in the same direction and notice this guy too. We were all just there having a staring contest and talking amongst ourselves as to why someone would possibly be here dressed like that. And not long after, Isaiah again shouted out to the guy, which caused some of the other people nearby to look around. I assume others noticed the oddity as they began staring, talking, and pointing, which then caused the guy to turn around and walk straight back behind the ledge, until he was gone. We all thought this was weird, but I, at least, didn't connect it to our previous night's experience at this point. I just thought that it was someone being weird. We ended up leaving shortly after to get stuff for dinner, as well as some lighter fluid, just to be prepared for our next fire. After dinner and freshening up, we tried to have a bonfire again. This time, it went a lot better, and we had loosened up and were having a blast. We were talking and teasing. The girls were even pushing their limits and making a fool of themselves. It was genuinely a great time for us. Well, that was until Leslie was again caught staring into the trees. That's when we all turned to look and saw the same guy. This form was the same, but with a giant flashlight Mike bought this time. We could shine the light right on him. He was wearing the same pants and suit, jacket, and hat. And when the light hit him, he didn't really budge though. He leaned his head down some, probably to block out some of the light, but otherwise, he didn't do anything else. Isaiah again yelled at the sky, but it was a bit more threatening. I don't really blame him though. The girls were getting pretty nervous, and this guy had obviously been following or watching us. But this time, after a lot of shouting, I think most of us started feeling uncomfortable with the situation, and we all agreed to go inside. Once in, Madison actually called the cabin management office and told them that someone was being creepy around our cabin and said that they would send someone out to take a look. The rest of the night wasn't as eventful, as the staring guy kind of made us sober up some, but we did watch another movie until some of us started getting drowsy. Leslie and Isaiah went to their room. Madison went to bed before the second movie ended, and I followed her after it was over, leaving Mike and Jess in the living room. Mike was already snoring, so I assumed they weren't going anywhere. I don't know the exact time, but I know that it wasn't more than an hour or so after I went to bed that I woke up to a piercing scream. Madison had been startled awake too, and after confirming that it wasn't her, I ran out of the room to find out what the hell had happened. I found Jess screaming in the living room. The front door was wide open, and Mike was gone. She then explained that she woke up to a scratching sound, and when she looked at the window behind the couch they were on, she saw someone trying to open it or at least standing at it. She then said that Mike ran out of the door to catch the guy. Isaiah and I ran out after him, but found him shouting towards the trees. When we caught up to him, he said that he had caught up to the guy, knocked his hat off, but the guy fought back with pepper spray or something to that sort. He said something hit his face, which made his eyes burn, and it was hard to breathe. We brought him back to the cabin, and this time, we called the cops and the office people. This time, Madison was not as nice. Police actually showed up pretty quickly, and then took our report. And then they looked around the cabins. They even went to a couple nearby and questioned those people too. They, of course, never found the guy or his hat. This guy most likely was brazen enough to go back and get it, and still miss the cops. Jess took Mike to the hospital, and Madison agreed to go with her, while the rest of us stayed behind. We never saw the guy again that night, but none of us went back to sleep either. After a few hours, the others came back and confirmed that it was just some sort of pepper spray, so he was going to be all right, but the trip had already been ruined. Jess, Leslie, and Mike were definitely not interested in staying the rest of the trip. No one could blame them either. And after some talking, we ended up packing up all of our stuff that night, and the other four took off. Madison and I were pretty shaken up too, but we still had this book for one more night, and she really wanted to give the front desk people a piece of her mind. I guess they didn't seem too concerned about the situation when she first called. And yeah, they probably should have been, because it was their property, and that could have been damaged. So, we put all of our belongings in the bedroom, locked the door, and tried our best to sleep there. The next morning was exhausting, as we didn't really sleep much. Management called us and apologized, and said that they could give a partial refund, but they did offer to move us to a different cabin. After informing our friends, they told us to enjoy, but that they didn't want to go back. They did move us to one that had an indoor hot tub, so that was pretty cool. We didn't have another run-in with the guy, but they also never found him. We still to this day have no idea why he targeted us or what his intentions even were if he were to break in. And the fact that he had pepper spray made me think that he had bad intentions of using it, or at least needing it. We haven't been on a trip with the others since, but we all still hang out and remember that creepy spring break that got ruined for us. And here's the riddle for this video. Hey everyone, this is your creepy sister. Thank you so much for watching the video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to leave a like and a comment. It really helps the channel out. A big shout out to both my channel members and Patreon members. Thank you so much for taking your support to the next level. You guys are great. And again, to everyone, stay scared because your fear feeds me.